The Xtalks Life Science Podcast is your source for all things pharma, biotech, medtech, healthcare, research, and more.
Hello and welcome to the Xtalks Life Science Podcast. I'm Ayesha Rashid, Senior Life Science Journalist at Xtalks.com. And this week, I am so happy to introduce a very special guest on the show. We are so honored to have amazing guests week after week, and this week is no different. So with us today, we have Thomas Zindrick, who is the President and CEO of Genelux Corporation, which is an immuno-oncology company focused on developing immunotherapeutics, specifically oncolytic virotherapies in cancers such as ovarian cancer and non-small cell lung cancer as well. Thomas has served as chairman since July 2021 and as a board member, president, and CEO since 2014. He brings more than 30 years of executive experience in the life sciences and biotechnology. In this episode, we will be hearing from Thomas about improving trial participation by fostering greater collaboration between teams and clinicians, addressing challenges in engaging patients who have undergone multiple lines of therapy, as well as the role of communication and patient-centered approaches in advancing cancer research. So without further ado, let's turn to Thomas now. Thank you so much for being on the show with us today.
Thank you, Aish. It's a real pleasure.
Pleasure is all ours. And I'd like to get started by first asking you a bit more about Genelux in terms of what the company's core missions, vision, and goals are in the oncology and immunotherapy space.
Thank you. Yes, we're a clinical stage company focused on the most significant oncology challenges of the day. We're currently in a phase 3 study in platinum-resistant refractory ovarian cancer, a very difficult patient population to treat, especially historically with immunotherapies. But we've had very exciting data in a phase 2 study that really was the foundation of what we're doing. So our mission really is to address some of the greatest unmet medical needs in oncology today and do that in a way that seamlessly integrates with physician practice, so that it will encourage widespread adoption. So with that lofty mission, of course, our goal, is pretty straightforward. It's to redefine the immunotherapy.
I love that because immunotherapy is, really taken off in the past decade or so. And I feel like it's just been amazing to see so many therapies come from concept translated into fruition, and with all of the approvals again in the past decade that we've seen in this space, but definitely a lot of challenges. And I want to get more into that in just a bit. But I'd like to learn a bit more about your background. As I understand, you're a lawyer by training, as you have a JD background. And so I'd like to learn more about how you've been able to take that background and what led you to join and, kind of foray into the space of biotech and biopharma, and ultimately what led you to Genelux.
Absolutely. Well, it certainly was not a straight path, nor one that I would have sort of laid out for myself when I first started after having graduated from law school. But I do have not only a JD, but a molecular biology background. And so with that, I was fortunate enough to join Amgen in the early 1990s. And that was a time when the company had just 2 approved products and, roughly, a couple thousand employees. Over my tenure there, it was about 17 years, the company grew to about 20,000 employees and multiple products. And with that, I was very fortunate to hold a number of executive leadership positions, including intellectual property, business development, FDA regulatory law issues, compliance issues. And I sat on a number of product development teams and was able to, see and learn from some of the world's preeminent drug developers, the full approach, comprehensive team-based approach to what it really takes to successfully develop a drug. So after I left Amgen, I was doing some consulting, and one of the companies that I engaged with was Genelux. And it was at that time I was fortunate enough to get an opportunity to understand, really dig in and understand the science and their lead asset, Ulvivac, as well as meet the team and meet the board and a number of important shareholders. So when the company called me back in the mid 2010s and asked me to join as president and CEO, it was a pretty easy decision. What I saw in Genelux was, just incredible opportunity, and it was really born out of academia. The technology was developed at Genelux, but the founder and the key employees were primarily former academics. And so it's a heavy science and research-based focus, which really helped the company develop the platform in many important ways. And I felt with my background, I could layer on that and help drive that research and that incredible science into deeply into the clinic, and hopefully into the clinics, so that we can help a maximum number of patients.
Yeah, that's a fantastic journey. And I really love that when we hear about journeys not being so linear, because I think that's really a reflection of how life goes. And I think that's so fantastic that you were able to build on those early experiences, and how it was so easy for you to say yes to the role that you're in at Genelux. So thank you so much for sharing that. And for people who may not be too familiar with oncolytic virotherapies, could you tell us a bit more about what exactly they are and why they're so promising, in your opinion?
Absolutely. And in fact, the entire field of oncolytic immunotherapies or virotherapies is one that is also not linear, is common for many new modalities. The technology itself has been around for a couple of decades, and it was, without going into the long history, I mean, there's a lot of anecdotal evidence of when vaccine-based viral therapy or viral therapy-based vaccines were administered into patients, there could be, and were reported cases of spontaneous cancer remission. And so it's a very intriguing perspective, and there have been, some interesting work done very early on as people try to really understand what that was, long before they appreciated what immunotherapy might be and what the implications. And then with the advent of chemotherapies, the field kind of was I wouldn't say pushed to the side. It just fell out of primary focus or focus. As other newer therapies were developed. But there has been this core group of scientists, researchers who have pursued this over many, many decades. And it was really with the advent of genetic engineering in the 80s and early 90s that the ability to sequence the entire genome of some of these viruses became prevalent. And then the ability to modify the viruses to repurpose them for different indications, most notably oncology, came to pass. In the development phase, there was a lot of interest and very exciting results coming out of preclinical studies in animal models. But as I mentioned, as is quite typical of newer modalities, what looked like a very straight line to what could be clinical success gets very complicated when moving from animals to humans and within a rigorous clinical environment. And with that, there was an early approval. There's only been one approval of an oncolytic virus in the United States. That's Amgen's Imlygic. It's a modified herpes virus that was acquired and developed after I had left Amgen. And it's been I think by any measure, a modest product in the marketplace, but it was really important because it was the opportunity, and Amgen did a fantastic job of educating patients, clinicians and the regulatory agencies about what this, oncolytic viruses could hold and what are some of their unique aspects and how to think about their development, maybe in a way that captures some of that uniqueness. So they've done a phenomenal job, I think, of setting the basis for future work. And over the last several years, there have been 3 programs in particular, including ours as one of those, which have really advanced the modality into later stage trials. And two of the other programs have shown, really strong data in their respective indications. And I think, will garner a lot of interest in the space now that they're in front of the FDA seeking regulatory approval. Those are, again, great advancements in the fields, but each of those has been limited to effectively local delivery. So while in their area, they're generating really good results, the question is, having demonstrated the power of an oncolytic immunotherapy, how do you ultimately address and capture its full potential? And that really is what we're focused on. We're developing a next generation oncolytic immunotherapy, one that has, significant ability to stimulate the immune system, modulate the tumor microenvironment to convert so-called cold tumors to hot, which is incredibly important as we think about our development path. And then notably, we have demonstrated already clinically and are doing so in 3 existing current clinical studies, the ability to administer Olvi-Vec, our lead asset, through physician preferred routes, going back to my point about what our mission is. And so we, in our phase 3 study in ovarian cancer with Olvi-Vec, have and are delivering the virus via catheter into the abdomen of patients, a not uncommon way to deliver chemotherapies for ovarian cancer patients. And somewhat differently in that, in the way we're pursuing it, because it's really a priming mechanism for the resensitization of recalcitrant tumors to further chemotherapy, we administer Olvi-Vec in a single cycle. So that catheter is in for, let's say, less than 2 weeks, during which time the patient will receive doses on 2 consecutive days. That's their only exposure to Olvi-Vec. And then we allow a certain period of time to let Olvi-Vec do what it needs to do to stimulate the immune system and remodel the tumor microenvironment to make those tumors more susceptible to re-challenge by chemo. And then we initiate standard chemotherapy through systemic IV route of administration. It's very exciting data, and one that, we're confident can help to redefine that particular indication in heavily pretreated ovarian cancer patients. Behind that, we also have 2 ongoing studies where we're administering Olvi-Vec systemically or intravenously, and those are in lung cancer. One is a small cell lung cancer trial that we are engaged with and co-sponsor with our trusted partner Nusora in China, and the other is a non-small cell lung cancer study that we're sponsoring and executing here in the U.S. And what's really exciting about that is it's a thematically integrated program, taking advantage of our most clinically advanced science around the platinum resensitization. And our intent is in phase 3 to reproduce really exciting phase 2 results. And in the lung cancer studies, demonstrate that and confirm the same hypothesis of platinum resensitization in multiple tumor types. Sort of the importance is not only in those indications, but preclinically, Olvi-Vec was shown to be effective against 20 major tumor types, almost all of which will be accessible systemically, many of which will be treated with platinum. And so we're very excited about what the future holds as we advance these clinical programs.
It's fantastic. And would this therapy, I know it's being studied in conjunction with chemotherapy to enhance its effects or to prime its effects, essentially. Would there be scope for it to be looked at as a monotherapy as well? I'm not sure if I missed that part, but.
It's a great question. We do have evidence of Olvi-Vec having activity as a monotherapy. In fact, when we first started a registration path trial in ovarian cancer, our intent was to pursue monotherapy. But interestingly, as a monotherapy, we had several patients in our phase 1b dose escalation that were exceptional responders. So to contextualize, when I say heavily pretreated patients, the patients we've been treating in our phase 1b2 study had a median of 4 prior lines of therapy, and typically would have enrolled with an expected life of somewhere between 6 months and less than 1 year. Their options were hospice or a clinical study, but really kind of end stage. And so in that regard, we were very encouraged that as a monotherapy, we were showing exceptional responses. So again, understanding the backdrop of these patients, we had one patient that had a progression-free period it was over 35 weeks. Another was approaching 60 weeks of progression-free, again, after just that single cycle of Olivec. And a third patient was over 70 or 75 weeks. And so it was based on that we were thinking about we in fact did initiate a phase 2 as a monotherapy. But what was transformational for us is as those exceptional responders began to progress and really with nothing else to offer them, the clinician felt that he would, in his medical terms, throw the kitchen sink at these patients and re-challenge them with frontline therapy, because they had the benefit of having been off chemotherapy for a sufficiently long time because of Olivec. He thought that perhaps they could better tolerate it at that point. And what he observed and ultimately concluded was that Olivec, in fact, had resensitized those tumors to platinum-based therapy. And despite the exceptional responses we were seeing as a monotherapy, we were even more heartened by the deep, durable responses that we saw when we layered in the platinum-based chemotherapy, the frontline platinum-based chemotherapy. Now, while we are pursuing that because it is our most advanced clinical data, we're not in any way believing that we're limited to platinum or chemotherapy. We think we could be, in addition to, chemotherapy, could be combined with other immunotherapies, cell therapies, for example, all of which we intend and have really begun at an early level to test. So we're advancing as quickly as we can in a speed to market approach to get this, Olivec out into the market and available to patients as early as possible. And we're hyper focused on that execution, but we're doing that with a long eye in terms of where we could ultimately develop the asset.
Indeed. Thank you so much for those details and that overview. And in terms of your current areas of focus, you're looking at this therapy in ovarian cancer and non-small cell lung cancer. Are there any particulars about these cancers that allowed or was the reason you chose to look at these indications perhaps compared to others?
It's a great question. We like a challenge, and those are, very intractable, especially in the recurrent setting. The reason for pursuing each of those, though, is I and the company are pretty conservative in terms of how we move forward, given the implications of, getting it wrong, what getting it wrong might mean. And so we really have this wealth of preclinical data that we fall back on, as well as having completed 7 clinical trials prior to these 3, in which we had administered Olivec through a variety of routes of administration to patients with a number of different tumor types, and in some cases combinations, for example, with platinum. So we had previously run a study in patients with, it's called peritoneal carcinomatosis. So it's cancer in the abdomen from a variety of different origins, one of which in the patients that we tested was ovarian cancer. We tested at several ovarian cancer patients and were intrigued. The other reason I picked with the team, we picked ovarian cancer is after I joined, we generated data that showed that if we got more aggressive with our dosing regimen, a little more concentrated, that we could drive a better therapeutic outcomes, at least preclinically. And so this was a more aggressive approach than the company had previously utilized. And in order to, again, put patients first, ensure that although we've never hit a maximum tolerated dose in any of those prior clinical studies or the ones we're on now. So we got a very safe safety or a very tolerable safety profile. We felt like if we're going to get more aggressive, let's start in a body cavity where any issues could be, somewhat blunted if there were concerns or something had happened. I'm happy to say, it all looked really good, and it feels like it was the right choice for the reasons that we selected, because, these patients that we're treating, their options are so very limited, and frankly, the bar is quite low, and we have well exceeded expectations of what an improvement in this population could be. On the systemic side, one of the earlier trials that we ran in a study where it was a dose escalation treating patients with a variety of solid tumors, we noted a particular benefit, an overall survival benefit in patients that had lung metastases. So, or lung disease. It could be primary, although there were only a few primary lung patients in the trial, but a lot of patients had lung mets. And that's consistent with our preclinical data, where because of the first pass effect of where the virus goes after injection and clearing the heart, as well as, the pulmonary circulation, which offers a lot of vascularization, we knew we could get a lot of Olvi-Vec into areas where there was, strong disease. And we thought by being able to do that, we could get a toehold in terms of infecting, killing, and stimulating the tumor cells and stimulating the immune system, in which we have already demonstrated through a variety of translational data that once we do that, we can generate a whole body anti-tumor immune response. And that's been shown, for example, even in ovarian cancer, while we administer Olvi-Vec into the abdomen, we've looked with pretty sensitive assays and have never found a live version of Olvi-Vec in the bloodstream. And yet, when we have taken analyses of, lung fluid where there have been, maybe circulating or available tumor cells, called malignant pleural effusion, we've seen an anti-tumor response in the lung when we've administered Olvi-Vec into the abdomen. So we believe that getting that toehold where we can get a really kind of rich environment for it to do it, to do what it needs to do to stimulate the immune system will give us our best opportunity. Again, I don't think we're at all limited to lung, but we're always trying to put the program in the best position to succeed as we move our way through clinical development.
That's awesome. And is there a particular targeting mechanism whereby these therapies, these viruses are able to target tumors, and especially like you mentioned, within the lung, with a great deal of efficacy over, let's say, other areas in the body? But as you said, there are systemic effects. But what is sort of the targeting mechanism behind that?
It's a great question. And again, I think this is kind of one of the superpowers of Olvi-Vec. It has been genetically modified in a way, without going into too many specifics, but in a way that it will selectively replicate in tumor cells. And so it doesn't need, and the particular viral backbone doesn't use a receptor or a biomarker to infiltrate or infect a tumor cell, but without it being an area where it's of high metabolic activity, and if it's in an area that is immunocompetent, the virus is cleared very rapidly and out of healthy tissue. However, in the tumor, where it is an area of high metabolic activity and it's immunosuppressed, think of it a little bit like a Trojan horse. The virus is able to infect the tumor cell and replicate and use the tumor's defenses against the immune system to be able to replicate and kill those tumor cells. And interestingly, then, with the killing of the tumor cells, the full complement of tumor neoantigens, those unique proteins that distinguish, a tumor from a healthy cell, are then exposed to the immune system in a way that the immune system can develop kind of a complete package of data to go after the various aspects of the tumor. So we think, it kind of turns the current development a little bit, I wouldn't say necessarily on its head, but the theory in the focus for a lot, tremendous results are occurring in targeted therapy. As we learn more, we know, how to go after those unique targets, but that segments the population. And if too specific, you can get feedback mechanisms in which the tumor figures out how to evade, and then the recurrence can come back. The way we are pursuing Olvi-Vec, and because of its unique mechanism of action, we believe we can develop an anti-tumor response against, like I said, the whole palette of targets through the immune system, while also remodeling the tumor microenvironment such that the tumor is then accessible for further therapy, whether it's platinum or, as I mentioned, other targeted therapies, immunotherapies, cell therapies. And the goal here is to attack the tumor from every possible angle near simultaneously to overwhelm its defenses. And we believe that is what gives us the best opportunity to really drive durable responses as we move forward.
That's so very, very interesting and very, very elegant how everything is orchestrated within, like you mentioned, the tumor and the tumor microenvironment, and really going in and modulating things. Really essentially a quintessential immunotherapeutic response. So that's so interesting and so powerful. In terms of speaking about the oncology landscape in general, how have you seen things evolve in the immuno-oncology space in particular? And where do you see oncolytic viruses, oncolytic virotherapies fitting in within that landscape moving forward? And what are some of the things that you're most excited about in the field?
It's a great question. Again, it comes back to, as we think about how to develop it, there are big bets that have to be made on both a strategic and tactical level. And so as we think about where the field is and where it is going, right, we're not only thinking about designing trials with and measuring against the standard of care today, but also looking at pipelines to say, where is it going to be in 5 or 10 years when the data comes out? And even if it's approvable, is it usable at that point, or will it be used at that point? Because we need to be able to, to confirm its benefits. And then tactically, clinical trials, are becoming, more complex in a lot of ways, because there's much better appreciation for how to define patients by tumor biomarkers or heterogeneity and the like. So there's a lot that goes into that thinking. In terms of your question about where we believe will fit into the immuno-oncology landscape, we think because of that unique mechanism that we offer, and it comes back to your question about a monotherapy, as other products are being developed, and I often, as you might expect, get calls from shareholders like, what does this mean for the company and the development? More often than not, when I've gone into it and really looked at these emerging pipelines, I don't see competitors. I see future collaborators, because we believe the ability to remodel the tumor microenvironment and this is I've referred to this multimodal mechanism of action. We think we have the future we have the potential in the future to be the backbone of combination therapy, and offer the opportunity for any number of modalities to be more successful. And so we feel like we are in a position where we can take best advantage of that. As we think about where the fields are going and the pipelines are developing, our question is, even with those developments, where are those next most significant unmet medical needs? As I mentioned, we like a challenge, and we want to see how we can, assist to go after those most, difficult to treat tumor types.
I love that. Collaborators over competitors. I think that's so powerful. And I think it really speaks to the landscape of drug development today as a whole. We see a lot more collaborations and a lot more initiatives where companies and different stakeholders are really wanting to partner to move things forward in their specific realms and really bringing together those expertise. And I think that's definitely a great sort of roadway that we're seeing a lot of drug makers taking as things
Absolutely.
are evolving in the landscape. And in terms of, I think that really is a great segue into the next question about how important collaborations are in biopharma today. Do you see more so of that happening in today's climate, and how important are they? Who are the different stakeholders at the table that are important, from patient advocacy groups to patients and caregivers themselves, through to, again, all of the amazing companies in the space, big pharma versus smaller biotech, the whole spectrum. So who are the important stakeholders at the table?
That's a big question. And the easy but really true comment is they all are, right? To be successful, there is no one company that is going to figure this out, right? It is truly going to take a village. And you named a number of the key stakeholders. Obviously, it starts with the patients, right? They, especially when dealing with patients who, are, in an advanced, disease where they've had multiple lines of therapy, they've starting to lose hope. We have to listen to them, right? And we also, they're trusting us. So we have to really, honor that trust to be able to always put them first. And that starts with, tactically some of the issues around how do we design a study that creates the least burden on them, in terms of, and answering the questions that are most significant to them in terms of quality of life and outcomes. And doing it in a way where, the therapy is, best tolerated. And so that, it has an effect, but it's really, and this was a comment that that really stuck with me when we were in the middle of our phase 2. I was speaking with our PI, and he made the comment, again, from a sort of at the floor level, that so many of therapies that he's tried in the past, he said, we're just keeping patients alive. He said what really caught his attention is we were giving patients life in our phase 2, where they could go back out and enjoy, the things that they love. And to me, that's at the heart of it. But that's only the beginning, right? And then you listed off, a number of other key stakeholders, whether it's their caregivers who are often forgotten, but are indispensable. The clinical sites, which they could, it's certainly gotten better, but post-COVID, they were under incredible strain, and they had staff shortages, and they were just overwhelmed and already burned out. And and seeing their just commitment under some pretty challenging circumstances, truly, truly inspiring. Patient advocacy groups. We work very closely with some of the leading advocacy groups in the ovarian space, and now we are starting to do that in the lung cancer space, and they've been critical. They don't advocate for us, right? They advocate on behalf of the patients, and so in that role, we try to arm them with as much information so as when they sit down with a patient, they can contextualize all of the patient's options. We're not going to be right for every patient, but we believe that with good, clear, transparent communication, it'll be apparent that we can be very helpful for a number of patients, and we just want to be there and available to them. Then, cooperative groups. We have a close relationship in the ovarian side with the Gynecologic Oncology Group Foundation, really the leading cooperative in this space. And, they have done a phenomenal job of working through their network of clinical sites to educate the folks around, around our trial. And it goes on and on. We've had very strong support from the FDA. I will definitely shout them out. They have been incredible in terms of their guidance to us. I mean, they make sure we dot the I's, cross the T's, but they do it in a way that is actionable. And that's all we want. We want clarity. We want consistency, and they've been great partners in that regard. And then as we think about, ultimately, how we approach the reimbursement authorities, and, are we going to be a benefit or a burden to what's already a strained healthcare system? And we clearly go into this believing that we can have significant benefit to that. And then finally, as you said, industry. We're still in a position, having spent quite a bit of time leading the transactions group within the Amgen Law Department, and building it up over a decade. From my perspective, there's a right time. Because in a collaboration, it really is sort of a professional marriage, and you got to come in there, being prepared to give and take, but offer something significant. And we believe, as these current trials are ongoing, the value proposition and the reason for answering the why, why should everyone, clinician sites, but even industry partners want to use limited resources. It unfortunately is too often a zero-sum game. So how do we get into that game? We always lead with the data and what we believe will be, high quality clinical trial designs and high quality execution to make our story, of an innovative therapy a compelling one. And we think, we certainly believe that, and our relationship with our partner Nusora is definitely evidence of that. That's been a phenomenal relationship, and it's really helped leverage our data as they advance the programs, not only geographically, but in new indications, which is what we would be looking for as we speak with other potential partners.
And in terms of the oncology drug development space today, there continue to be very many challenges, however, a lot of opportunities as well on the flip side. So what would you say are those challenges and opportunities if we talk about the landscape today?
Absolutely. Challenges include big one, especially in the oncology space with a lot of new therapies coming in around targets, is competition for patients. And even I would argue in cases where earlier, less proven clinically, I'm not saying may not be really significant, but less proven clinically, they are still, they come into the clinic with a rationale for how they may be important. And if they're a targeted therapy, they'll be looked at as something kind of new and exciting and worthwhile. I completely appreciate that. But it does make the need for us to work that much harder, and it makes us better to tell our story, and also tell it in a way at the patient level with patient-friendly communications. At the site level, again, working with our national PI and his team, and really having close collaborations with the clinical sites to answer their questions about the protocol or who may be good patients. One thing we did, which has been, nothing short of, huge for us, is one of one of the key research nurses in our phase 2 trial left for her institution. And several months after that, we learned about her having departed, and we reached out to see whether or not she might be willing to join us. And we were fortunate that we were able to bring her on. And so she's been incredible because she's gone to all the clinical sites and she can sit down with the staff, because when you think about it, we are re-challenging patients who have failed platinum, maybe multiple times. And in some cases, they're refractory, meaning on their last exposure to platinum, they progressed while receiving drug. Our phase 2 data showed those refractory patients performed equivalently well to resistant patients, which is most telling. If you think about using a patient as her own control, what's more compelling than a patient who is receiving platinum and progresses while on platinum, then gets put on, receives Olivac, gets re-challenged with platinum, and has an 11-month progression-free survival period as a late-stage patient. It's still a leap of faith, right, for many sites. And having, our clinical site liaison go to the sites, sit down with staff and say, look, I've been there. I've been on your side of the patient chair as a clinical research nurse. Her ability to educate and bring people along the story, because it is a bit counterintuitive, has been, really helpful in getting that excitement built up. But we've recently hired a new chief medical officer, Dr. Jason Litton, who is already been engaging with the investigators and will also kind of redouble on that. And so really working through patients, working through the clinical sites to be transparent, and then the advocacy groups and basically other sources like the cooperatives to get the word out and really see what we can do about driving patient enrollment. As I mentioned, it's a complex engagement and it's significant. These trials can be $50 to $100 million plus, and so you have to have conviction and a fair amount of courage to make that decision and to move forward. And we think as I mentioned, are doing that in a very conservative, responsible way as we progress.
And in terms of upcoming milestones at Genelux, what are some of the things that we can keep an eye out for here at Xtalks? And of course, our audiences listening in, what are some of the most important and milestones coming up that you're most excited about that we can expect to see this year and in the next couple of years?
Yeah, there is.
Without giving too much away, of course.
No. This is so when not only speaking on the tenure that I've had at Genelux, which is almost it's a little over a decade now, but even the folks who preceded me and who have been on this journey, this is such an incredible year for us. It's we've guided that we're going to have top line data, meaning around our primary endpoint on the ovarian cancer study by the end of this year. We put out some initial data because we were still in dose escalation in the lung studies, but we put out some very encouraging data in January of this year in both of those trials. And even though it's still fairly early and certainly not dose optimized, what we're starting to see are some dynamics that look, very similar to what we were seeing in the early days of ovarian. And so to be able to then build on that thematic approach where we can, seek to demonstrate that we're a pan tumor resensitization agent, is just hugely exciting. So through the course of the year, we will be providing, one or more additional updates on each of those lung studies, sort of building up to that top line data. And then moving into next year, we will, with our expectation that data will be positive out of the phase 3, begin the preparations for further discussions with the FDA about submitting a BLA and ultimately seeking market authorization while we are concurrently advancing those lung trials into deeper phases and hopefully registration phases in both non-small and small cell, which are, just significant unmet medical needs. And we're anxious to be able to generate this data this year and then tackle what's next on the horizon.
That's so exciting. And I can feel the excitement as you were talking. So it's so wonderful. And thank you so much once again for sharing all of the amazing, fantastic work that you're helping lead at Genelux. And Thomas, I'd like to thank you so much once again for being here with us today and for your time and very, very wonderful and important insights and work once again.
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity. I'm a big fan and have really enjoyed getting to know you and following Xtalks.
Oh, likewise. Thank you so much. And we're definitely going to be keeping in touch with Genelux and hope our audiences will also stay tuned to all of the amazing work coming out of the company in the immuno-oncology space. All right, that's the end of this episode of the Xtalks Life Science Podcast. If you liked today's show, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. And of course, to especially like this episode, which I'm sure that our audiences very much enjoyed. And so we hope that you'll be able to do that. And we hope to see you on our next episode next week. Bye for now.
Visit Xtalks.com to join the life science community and unlock exclusive access to editorial content, webinars, networking opportunities, and more. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the speakers sharing them and should not be taken as professional advice, nor do they necessarily reflect the policies or positions of Honeycomb Worldwide. For more information, email us at podcast@xtalks.com.